So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this one is going to be another field battle, a pitch battle, although this one isn't on the grassy plain, so it is a little bit more... There's a few more features to look at on this battle, I suppose. There's even a river in the background, so it's not quite as plain as the grassy plain. And it's actually two Gondorian armies who we're going to be viewing this from the perspective of. So this one was sent to me by Maximus Decimus Meridius, and he is going to be joined by Rules 1, and they are going to be facing off against Blue Ranger, who is playing as the Witch Realm of Angmar, and then he is going to be supported by Orange Firedon, and it's good to see him again. I haven't seen him in one of these for quite some time, and he's going to be playing as Isengard, so two Orcish factions going up against the very solid Gondor. And interestingly enough, when you have teammates and you all go for the same faction, you can certainly make more of your strengths in a way, as long as you all build your armies towards a specific end. So I'd be interested to see how Gondor have decided to set up. It does not surprise me that Gondor have gone for some hardy skirmishers, purely because the Orcs, even Angmar, can contest the skirmish fight with a lot of lower quality archers but high volume. And something like the Gondor archers will be able to go toe-to-toe with such a thing, purely because they are pretty resilient, especially when you've got both levels of armour upgrades like Maximus has decided to go for here. So obviously a very tough and sturdy skirmisher. Generally speaking, that's how Gondor go about things in a skirmish fight, very similar in many ways to Umbar in that respect. And unlike the Orcs in particular, who can only really go for volume and sort of efficiency in that way, Gondor can invest in some higher tier skirmishers as well, which he has decided to do so with some veterans of Osgiliath. Now the veterans of Osgiliath obviously are just better archers than the standard Gondorian archers, and they also double as pretty decent line infantry. They have a shield value as well as very impressive armour values and pretty decent damage values for the kind of unit that they are at range. I'm not sure whether I would call them the same sort of unit as something like the Bardian Marksman or the Abrazani Nadubawi, but I would say they're a little bit on the upper end of things even compared to them. You do pay quite a lot for the veterans of Osgiliath, but you know, you get what you pay for in terms of a unit like this, and they are very, very solid indeed. Then another unit of Gondor archers with both levels of armour upgrades as well. And then here in the middle, we have some Gondorian spearmen who have both levels of armour upgrades as well. So Gondor certainly making use of the fact that they can have two levels of armour upgrades here, which will substantially increase the survivability of your units both in melee and at range. The number increase that you will see on the tooltip only says a defensive increase of 2, but functionally speaking, upgrading your armour twice is like upgrading it by 4. So this is a big increase, and also obviously this means that units like spears will be able to hold the line for a substantial amount of time, longer than they otherwise would, and obviously these Gondorian spears. Gondor in general have got a very good polearm contingent. The spearmen are sort of the most basic sort of building block of that. And obviously decent amount of mass that they can bring here, which is going to be important, particularly when going up against Angmar, who likely have brought tools which can line break quite effectively. So we'll see how well the Gondor spearmen can hold up to that. Now back here, all of these armour upgrades have come at a bit of a price, because they have also brought some Ramus Equal Garrison, which as far as militia goes, they sacrifice the benefit which most militia offer you, which is having a cheap fodder unit that you can essentially send to try and zone out cavalry, because they do not have spears, they are equipped with swords instead. But the obvious benefit to this is they do not have a spear mallus, so they can actually fight in melee, and in particular, they can be pretty good at sort of equalising the numbers against a very quantity-focused Orcish army, which Angmar, for the most part, often like to traffic in. But we'll see how well the Ramus Equal Garrison can do here. They're here for no other reason than adding a lot of numbers to the line, and obviously the fact that they're quite cheap. And hidden in amongst them, as I'm sure you can see, the ever-impressive Fountain Guard, who, against the likes of Angmar, again, going to be very, very important. Angmar can bring some pretty scary units, and if they've gone for a quality-focused build, which based on the map they may very well have done with the lack of red triangles on the minimap, the Fountain Guard will be very good at dealing with things like Guardians of Khan Dûm, or even Blackwatch Legion. The Blackwatch Legion may very well be able to disrupt the Phalanx formation by pushing through, but they will pay a hefty price for that with how fast the Fountain Guard can cut their way through units such as that. Back here we also have some Pelagia Marines, again hidden in the back lines. Not too surprising to see them either. Potentially obviously going to be good at dealing some damage to trolls, for example, or even zoning out some of the quite scary Angmar cavalry, such as their wargs and their Witch Realm Inquisitors. They do need to be careful, however, because trolls, of course, and line-breaking units are going to be trying to make a beeline for them to stop them from throwing their AP projectiles. Maximus's general is going to be in the Nimlothian Honour Guard, and obviously this is a very, very solid unit indeed. Essentially a shielded, better version of the Fountain Guard as a single unit goes, and obviously they're going to be able to deal with most of what comes at them from Angmar. There are a few exceptions to that, potentially. I would be interested to see how they would get on fighting against the Witch Realm Hammer Guard if the Hammer Guard got their charge off. We'll see. I think the Nimlothian Honor Guard are going to be here primarily to make sure the centre of the line holds itself together quite nicely. And then up here, Gondor do have a cavalry presence in addition to some rangers, so the rangers I imagine are going to hide for as long as possible, wait until Angmar blobs up, and then the body-piercing projectiles will be let loose. And obviously we all know how dangerous rangers can be. And then Maximus's cavalry contingent, we got some Gondor cavalry, which are spear cav. Gondor can now contest a cavalry fight. This is their only real tool for doing so, to be honest. And they do have the armour upgrades as well. But even so, against Angmar, this is more something to minimise the impact of Angmar's cavalry if they have gone cavalry heavy, to be honest with you, because wargs and especially the Witch Realm Inquisitors will still put the Gondor cavalry into a dumpster. But you know, the Gondor cavalry will at least be able to fight back, unlike previously the Gondor cavalry was kind of just had to sit there and take it. Some more Gondor cavalry, and that's going to be it, so a couple of units there. We'll go through his allies' army now, who's going to be Rules 1. I would be very surprised. It does look as though Rules has gone for the more layered skirmish approach as per usual. And he's gone for the slightly cheaper alternative for his frontline archers, the Ramus Ekor Garrison archers. Very much the Orcish philosophy here in a nutshell. Ironically from the Gondorians, they don't have the same sort of numbers as an Orc unit, but the functionality of them is largely the same. The fact that they don't have a great deal of damage, they are mainly there to soak up arrow fire, bleed your enemy of their ammunition, and they can fight back obviously, of course, but their primary directive is going to be trying to take away the ammunition of your opponent. And obviously, you know, with their shield values, their slightly higher armor values than other units of a similar type, they can do a pretty good job of that, and Rules has gone for the layered approach, having one behind the other. Over here, Rules' front line is composed differently to his allies. Instead of going for spearmen and then backing them up with Fountain Guard, he's gone for Gondor infantry with both levels of armour upgrade. So they won't have the same sort of mass, so they won't be able to resist line pushing quite so much, but then Isengard of all the Orc factions are probably the ones least likely to try that anyway. So perhaps a good move here, but they will of course be able to go toe-to-toe much better with the Orcish infantry in melee. I think the Uruk-hai infantry with the armour upgrade would still beat the Gondor infantry 1-to-1. But the Gondor infantry would very heavily defeat the stuff like the Dunlending clansmen and the Uruk-hai raiders, all of the low-tier Orc units. The Gondor infantry would be quite comfortable fighting them, particularly with the backup of the Guards of Osgiliath, obviously very good pikemen. They may have to go toe-to-toe with the Uruk-hai pikemen, which would be interesting. The Guards of Osgiliath, you can only have 2 before the cost increases. So even though they are quite high quality for their price, you can't just blanket your lines with them to the same extent that you can, for example, as Arthedain or Cardland with their slightly cheaper pikes. Back here, more missiles, so again, this is very much reminiscent of most of the armies I've seen Rules use. A lot of skirmishers, the Gondor archers, these don't have the armour upgrades, but considering the amount of missiles he probably has at his disposal, they're not of the highest quality in terms of damage, but it's going to be very difficult for Isengard to pepper them down from a distance, especially if they've gone crossbow heavy. All of these archers will immediately try and target them, and it will make it very difficult for Isengard to use their crossbows. More Gondor infantry with the armour upgrade, so again, a secondary line. Before we go too far back, we can see another unit of Ramus Ekor Garrison, as well as some ITHILIEN Rangers. So the ITHILIEN Rangers, of course, will be remaining in hiding until all of Rules' other archers have already bled Isengard of their strength. We shall see how that goes. Ramus Ekor Garrison, of course, as previously we said with Maximus's army, they're just going to be there because they're cheap. We'll see how well they can do against Isengard's units. Nimlothian Honor Guard, is this his general? It is, so another general in the Nimlothian Honor Guard unit, and obviously we said previously of them as well that they are incredibly tough to bring down, very, very dangerous. And then back here we have some Citadel Guard and some Pelagian Marines. We've seen the Pelagian Marines before, of course, same philosophy over here with Rules, I'm sure. But the Citadel Guard, most spears are used as fodder. Even the higher tier spears for the most part in the current patch are used primarily as just sort of a stopgap unit, a unit you can throw in without really thinking too much about it. But the Citadel Guard, they are much more dangerous because they are AP, and this is where one of Gondor's faction bonuses comes into play. The fact that their polearms and their spears in general are just a little bit stronger than their neighbours. The Citadel Guard's AP means they can go toe-to-toe with infantry of a similar cost and win. You know, against stuff like Guardians of Khan Doom, that AP will really stand them in very good stead, and they should be able to support the Gondor infantry in a big way. But less damage on foot over here purely because there's no Fountain Guard here in the mix, but Rules has gone for a more skirmish heavy approach. Now let's go and see what Angmar, I think, has brought to the battle today. So we have Blue Ranger, and indeed I'm not really too surprised to see the Witch King and his Inquisitors riding today. Gondor, Maximus in particular, is going to have to be very, very careful with how he chooses to engage the Angmar cavalry. He would be much better served trying to hold back, trying to pepper down the wargs, I think, with the archers, and then trying to isolate the Witch Realm Inquisitors, because they're so dangerous, they're so powerful in a cavalry fight. As are the wargs, to be fair. The wargs, what really lets them down is their low melee defense and armor, so when their hit points are expended, they do tend to drop away pretty quickly, especially under ranged fire. But they make the ideal foil, really, for the Witch Realm Inquisitors. The main body of the Angmar army is small, actually, to the point where I'm almost certain there's going to be quite a lot of hidden units. Good to see the Gundabad Guard, though. Maybe not the optimal choice with the current build of things. I think with the changes to spears coming in 0.97, stuff like the Gundabad Guard should be a lot more of an attractive pick, because at the moment they only cost 100 less than the Guardians of Kharndoom, but the Guardians of Kharndoom are certainly worth 100 more than that even, than the Gundabad Guard as it stands. But still, they are still good spears, so they could still add to the pushing power here of Gundabad. Back here we got some Angmar Marauders, just the basic variant actually, without the armor upgrade. So the Angmar Marauders, actually, wait, what am I saying? I don't think the Angmar Marauders have an armor upgrade. I'm very confused. But the Angmar Marauders obviously primarily here because they have very high unit numbers, so obviously Angmar in general, a lot of their lower tier units have over 250 men in the unit on huge settings, which gives them a huge numbers boost, which, considering Angmar's very aggressive playstyle, is often needed to try and mitigate the damage they will take during their very aggressive pushes. We do have some Blackwatch Legion as well, so it is pretty clear that Angmar wants to indulge in a bit of mass pushing over here. We shall see if Maximus is going to be prepared for that. Actually, he's probably better prepared for it than Rules would be with his very skirmish-heavy approach. And then over here out on this flank we can see that the General's model over here is going to be in the Witch Realm Blackguard, which are very, very strong. One of the finest infantry units in the game, both in terms of stats and in terms of what I've actually seen them accomplish in the past. They are very, very strong indeed. And then we got some Trolls of Gundabad as well. So obviously some Trolls, which should go quite nicely with the high mass units over here. I'd be interested to see what units they have hidden, because surely they do. This army is nowhere near big enough to have taken up all of his budget. He's got some very expensive units in here, yes, but he certainly would have some Snaga, I'm sure. Meanwhile, let's see what Orange has brought. He's got some wargs as well. And Rules actually does not have cavalry, although in this case that's... Oh no, he does. He's got some Gandalf's Retinue Bodyguard out on the flank. I cannot believe I missed those. I made a mental note to mention those. Obviously multiple HP Lancers, which do not have an anti-cavalry bonus. They are multiple HP though, but against this Isengard cavalry I'm not sure that would matter. They want to stay away from the wargs if they can. Orange Phaedon is going to want to try and entrap Rules' cavalry with his wargs and kill it off as quickly as possible, because Rules will certainly want to be trying to charge into some of the softer targets that Isengard have. Isengard in general do have a lot of anti-cavalry in their roster, however. Their mortal enemies being Rohan, that is not too surprising. The Dunlander units, for example, all the Dunland units have got an anti-cavalry bonus, I believe. The Clansmen actually beating Spears have got an increased anti-cavalry bonus. But the Berserkers, they may be two-handed axes, and that comes with all of the usual accoutrements. So they have anti-armor, obviously good charge, good damage. Terrible defense, obviously, not a lot of skill, not a lot of armor. They also have an anti-cavalry bonus on top of that, so interesting to see them. You don't actually see them an awful lot because of the risks with bringing them. Isengard do have safer units, and Isengard in general do tend to be played in a rather formulaic fashion. So I'd be interested to see how Orange gets on here. He's got some Uruk-hai pikes in front. These will not be the first unit to be sent in, I'm sure. They're just here to prevent an immediate frontal charge from Rules' cavalry if he had brought any. Obviously the Uruk-hai pikemen, one of the standards of any Isengard army, so it'll be interesting to see how they get on facing off against the infantry that Rules has brought. Some Uruk-hai infantry without the armour upgrades. Even without the armour upgrades, I'm not sure who would win in a fight between them and a fully upgraded Gondorian infantry. I guess we will find out. Orange certainly needs his infantry to do some work though, because it's going to be Rules' army in the way it's laid out. It's going to be a pretty tough nut to crack. What have we got going on up here? More Uruk-hai infantry, more Berserkers out here on the flank. There's actually more cavalry as well, so let's get into that before we get into Orange's backlines. He's got some more Warg Riders, obviously good. And then he's also got some Warg Skirmishers. So, Warg Skirmishers, as long as they stay away from Rules' archers, which is easier said than done, they should do pretty well for themselves at trying to hunt down enemy cavalry. But we shall see. It's going to be difficult. Rules tends to play, I've noticed, with armies that are quite difficult to fight. Not really a lot of risk involved with Rules' army, to be honest with you. It's all going to be on Orange here and how he plays as to how this fight goes, because if he plays really, really well, Rules could find himself getting overwhelmed in the infantry fight, but if he doesn't, then Rules' archers and just the general difficulty of fighting an army like that will probably just come through for him. We've got some Manifold Bane Guards, so that's more AP. AP is going to be very useful against Gondor, obviously. You don't see the Bane Guard an awful lot either, because the Uruk-hai Reavers have got more men in the unit and are cheaper, although the Bane Guard do have some higher defensive values. We shall see if that comes through for them. In this fight, we've also got some Trolls of the White Hand, obviously, with their gormless-looking expressions. Very, very powerful in a sustained melee fight, however. They are real juggernauts. And then back here we have some Nazkai and some Uruk-hai Berserkers. So Isengard have got a pretty big selection of armour-piercing units here. They may also have some hidden Snaga skirmishers as well, hard to say. But without further ado, let's begin. It's a fairly sizable battle as well. 20k frames is a pretty decent length for a 2v2. And the Uruk-hai pikemen are going to be moving forward. I would be very surprised if they were the first ones in. But having said that, against an army like this that Rules has brought, you can't really afford to sit back and really do nothing. And to be honest with you, Orange has brought primarily melee units as well. So it would not surprise me if he went... Looks like he's going to go around here and then just go in for a full attack. Angmar, I would imagine, are going to do very much the same thing, because all of the skirmish power here lies with Gondor, even if Isengard and Angmar both have hidden units, which I'm sure we'll be able to see Angmar's hidden units. But yeah, Snaga Stalkers. So that's just more very low tier fodder that's just going to be sent forward. And some Barrow Wights, actually, as well as some Goblin Band. You don't see the Goblin Band an awful lot either, because they are essentially... You have to pay money for them, and they have the same sort of capabilities as the units that you get for free, like the Snaga Stalkers. The Barrow Wight's obviously going to be very, very useful for Angmar here. It's going to be very difficult for Gondor to get rid of them. Even the Fountain Guard won't kill them off too quickly because of their... I think it's 5 HP they have, or is it 4? It could be either. You can actually see over here that Rules is going to be shifting his cavalry over, and that's probably because Isengard have got more of a mounted presence, and also the fact that Angmar here are sort of sticking out some of these units out in front. So the opportunity for a side charge here from the Gandalf's Retinue Bodyguard could be presenting itself, but I think he's thought twice of that almost immediately. It does look as though Blue Ranger and Maximus's armies will be the first ones to collide. It's going to be interesting to see how Orange approaches the layered skirmishers that Rules has laid out for him. I mean, Rules' infantry is pretty good still, but the fact that Orange seems to have invested just so much more into his infantry, he has got some Snaga skirmishers as well, so I think this is the only unit of Isengards that would be able to hide. But I would be very surprised if these javelins were allowed to get into throwing range. More Uruk-hai infantry, but yeah, Orange doesn't really have anything in terms of ranged firepower. What have we here? Which Realm Inquisitors? So the Orcs, in typical Orc fashion, I suppose, trying to sort of spread themselves, trying to cause a bit of claustrophobia here in the blue team, sort of pushing Gondor back, squeezing their position, not giving them much room to manoeuvre. There is actually a Gandalf's Retinue Bodyguard that I missed as well in Maximus's army. And you can see here that Angmar's cavalry is immediately coming forward. I'm actually quite surprised that Maximus isn't seeing this, because trying to get rid of these multiple HP Lancers will certainly be a worthwhile endeavour, just because of how deadly they can be. It is a risky proposition though, because there are these ITHILIEN Rangers and there are also these Gondorian cavalry, which will certainly not go down without a fight. Here come the Gondor cavalry, we get the Gandalf's Retinue Bodyguard in a bad way as Angmar continue to press forwards with their numbers. The Barrow Wights are lagging behind. That is a problem with the Barrow Wights. They do take a long time to cover ground, so it will be quite a while before we actually see them. What on earth is going on here? We can actually see that Rules did come over and get a nice rear charge here into these Angmar Marauders. The Goblin Band are in there as well though, and they do have spears, so Rules does need to be a little bit careful. In fact, they're shaken. There are also some Warg Riders coming across now. Another charge is coming in. In fact, it might be worthwhile to just go into a bit of slow-mo here so that we can take account of things happening elsewhere in the battle. Another nice charge there, getting into the Angmar Marauders, trying to cut down on Angmar's numbers, which numbers are going to be Angmar's best friend here, because Gondor's infantry is a pretty good quality in both armies in places, and their best bet for killing off things like Fountain Guard and Imlothian Honor Guard is pure numbers, just overwhelming them, surrounding them. I'm kind of surprised Rules actually didn't charge into the Blackguard here. This Retinue Bodyguard is still shaken, however. Meanwhile, we can see that Isengard have also arrived onto Rules' front line, and this sort of skirmish-heavy approach, when tackling an army which is intent on being this aggressive, could turn out to be more of a liability than a help for Rules. Now, he's a good enough player that he can probably make this work for him as well, if he can sort of pull his archers into the back lines and make it difficult for Isengard to chase all of them, and force them to engage with their front line here. Obviously, the combination of Gondor Infantry and Guards of Osgiliath is a pretty good one-to-one match, honestly, with the Uruk-hai Infantry and Pikemen. But Isengard certainly have more in reserve when it comes to their melee units than Gondor do over here, at the very least. The Citadel Guard could prove to be pretty important as the fight goes on, but Isengard certainly need to get through these lines quickly. Otherwise the range firepower is going to be pretty substantial. Blue Ranger here, I'm kind of surprised, honestly, that this is still being allowed to happen. Rules' cavalry is causing really grievous damage to their lines, and as soon as their charges start connecting with something like the Blackwatch Legion, that's very bad news. Now, fortunately, Orange Phaedon is over here to try and help matters, and there are still some spears in here, and the Warg Riders are coming in, and they are going to trap some of the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard. There should be enough to kill several of them, and the Trolls are also coming down here. And let's go and have a look at what happened to the rest of the Gondorian cavalry before we go anywhere else on the field. The Gondor cavalry from Maximus over here is charging into some of these units on the outside. The Goblin Trackers, actually, so trying to shut down some of Angmar's ranged units. And they're going to be pretty defenseless, honestly, but the Gondor cavalry is still shaken because they've taken a real beating over here. The Witch Realm Inquisitors laying waste to much of the Gondorian cavalry, and this is going to be the issue that Gondor have against really powerful anti-cavalry units. Obviously, Angmar can bring them, Dol Amroth can bring them, Khan as well, especially. Gondor's cavalry, with the addition of the Gondor cavalry being made spear cav, they can at least fight back, but they are never really going to have too much of an advantage. It's very rare that Gondor's cavalry is going to be able to go toe-to-toe on horseback with other factions. There are exceptions to that, but they are few and far between. And the Witch Realm Inquisitors really hunting down the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard now, trying to kill off these really deadly units. The Wargs have taken some damage. But let's go back onto the front line, where the frame rate is starting to stutter a little bit with all of these filthy orcs and Snaga charging into the front lines. Now, fortunately for Blue Ranger, while he has taken damage, he is going up against primarily Gondor spearmen here. And their spear malice means they won't be able to kill off the majority of these units as quickly as they may want to. And also you can see pushing forward the Blackwatch Legion. The Blackwatch Legion should be able to push into this Gondor spear wall and start causing some real havoc. In the back lines, you can actually see the Warg Riders just sort of still hanging around. The Barrow Wights slowly but surely plodding their way forwards, as well as Snaga archers providing some support. Witch Realm Blackguard, the Gundabad Guard coming in, so they're not panicking yet, Gondor, but maybe they should be, because when Angmar get rolling, it could be really, really difficult to stop them, and the momentum is with them at the moment, because the Gondor spear line has not really held up too well. The Fountain Guard are coming in now, but whether this is too little too late remains to be seen. Meanwhile, Isengard are pushing forwards. The frontline engagement has begun. And unfortunately for Isengard, they cannot really get at these Gondor skirmishers at this point, mainly because a lot of their units actually stayed in the back lines. I'm actually quite surprised here, especially considering the presence of Rules having this cavalry, that Orange Phaedon did not push forward all of his units all at once to really put the screws to Gondor. But as it is, the Gondorian front line is going to hold out. With the support of their archers, they will probably win again in this fight against the Uruk-hai as well. The Guards of Osgiliath, a very strong pike unit, and with the armour upgrades, the Gondor infantry are not half bad either. Isengard trying to get into the back line, some of the Uruk-hai infantry making it, but the Ramasakor garrison that were in reserve able to stop their advance. And they might even win this fight just by virtue of having so many more in terms of numbers. Meanwhile, down here we can see the Gondor spearmen fighting off against the Gundabad Guard. Gundabad Guard in general are stronger spears. I'm not sure how much the armour upgrades would change that. Here we can see the Trolls of Gundabad causing havoc in the midlines, and really the Ramasakor garrison are not going to do much to stop them. The Fountain Guard will, however. The Fountain Guard, while Trolls are pretty good against units that are in phalanx because they start disrupting the formation, the damage of the Fountain Guard is such, the AP damage especially is such, that the Trolls of Gundabad will probably start to struggle before too long. You can see over here now that the victory of the Angmar cavalry is not quite complete. Well, I guess it kind of is, actually. Angmar's cavalry was victorious, but they're pretty damaged after that. and I would assume that the support from the Pelagier Marines and the Rangers has got quite a lot to do with that. So Angmar's cavalry trying to get into the backlines to charge, but with the numbers being what they are, it's not going to be quite as devastating as the charges that Rules was able to deliver with his Gandalf's retinue bodyguard. Speaking of which, is this still them? Nope, that's the trolls. Where did they run off to? Ah, here they are. There's still 21 of them as well, so while they did take a bit of damage by getting sandwiched by those wargs earlier on, they have not been tied down. And that is very, very good for Gondor. However, as time goes on, the numbers from Orange's more infantry-centric Isengard army starting to have a bit more of an impact. Over here especially you can see the numbers of the Uruk-hai starting to put real pressure on the Gondorian line, but as Rules often does, he has got layers that he can use. He's got reserve Gondor infantry and reserve Citadel Guard, which will probably be a cause for concern for Isengard here. The Gondor infantry, once again, these Uruk-hai infantry trying to push around to the flank to get to the skirmishers, but once again, Rules with reserve units is able to stop this. And now with a rear charge from the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard is going to be enough to break that pretty healthy unit of Uruk-hai infantry, so a real blow there for Orange Phaedon. The trolls of the right hand are coming in now, which could cause significant damage. Now it is worth saying that if this whole front line of Rules crumbles, he only has one more line before all of his skirmishers will then be exposed to all of the nastiness that Isengard can bring, and they still have Nazkai, Berserkers and such that can be thrown in. The Barrow-wights, very slowly but surely, are getting into closer to melee range. But all throughout this battle, we've been seeing arrows fly in from the Gondorians into the advancing orcs, and it's quite difficult to gauge how well the archers are doing. But I'm sure that the majority of the kills here for the blue team is going to be coming from their skirmishers. You can also see, though, that Angmar really trying to kill off these Pelagier Marines, trying to deny Gondor their javelins. But at this point, Angmar's cavalry is pretty much gone. They still have a few Witch Realm Inquisitors, but not enough really to make too much of a lasting impact on the battle. So it's going to come down to infantry. And this is a real grind. I can't really imagine that either side is going to look too healthy after this. The Gondorian skirmishers might be able to salvage it a little bit more for Gondor, but with the advancing Barrow-wights, who knows? I'm actually really surprised here that the Blackwatch Legion are not pushing. Because if they did, they would probably be causing Gondor a lot more trouble. Gondor, you can see, are quite happy for the orcs to be contained right in front of them. If the Blackwatch Legion would have pushed through here, especially if they time it for when the Barrow-wights are here, especially, it would make life really, really difficult for the Gondorians. And also, you can't really afford to just sit here when you're taking javelin and arrow fire. And you can see that Rules' cavalry is still just running around. You can see that Orange is trying to box it in with his wargs. Over here, though, you can see that now some of the AP units are arriving on this flank, and the Bane Guard and the Dunland Berserkers in particular are going to be able to slice their way through Ramazekor garrison pretty quickly, honestly. How well are these trolls doing? And you can see that this has been enough to prompt Rules to shore up his front line. The Nimlothian Honor Guard have moved forward to try and deal with the trolls. And obviously with their damage they would be able to do so. These Warg Riders are still in range of the Gondorian firing squad, however, and at this point a decision needs to be made. Pull the Wargs out or charge them in. But with all of Gondor's anti-cavalry options here, and particularly with the range doing damage to the Wargs, I would probably just cycle them out and wait. What was happening up here with Rules' cavalry, however? The Trolls of Gundabad have done pretty well for themselves, considering they were in close proximity to Fountain Guard. Rules' Gandalf's retinue bodyguard getting mixed up on the few surviving Inquisitors. As we have a look here, which is where the frames are struggling a little bit. And we can actually see the Nimlothian Honor Guard. Where the Nimlothian Honor Guard are, actually, Gondor is starting to push back against the Gundabad advance, and that is actually where the Blackguard are as well. As well as where the Trolls are, but I feel as though one of the things which has worked against Angmar here, certainly, as the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard continues to hunt down the Trolls, is the fact that the Barrow-wights were not on the front line when they were really needed. The Barrow-wights are so good in a sustained fight like this, but they haven't been here this whole time. Now they're finally getting there, but Gundabad have already taken some... Angmar have already taken some pretty substantial losses. The same is pretty much true for Isengard. Isengard didn't have all of their offensive units on station when they were really needed. And this has allowed Rules to get a lot more value off with his skirmishers, which when you're facing off against a competition like this, that's all you really want. This sort of layered skirmish approach is designed pretty much entirely to make life awkward for your opponent.
Without their general, they may lose heart and flee.
Because you can't really skirmish with it too effectively, especially when it's a faction like Gondor, who are pretty good in a skirmish fight regardless. And if you do charge forward, like Orange has done, you need to be on the money with your advance. Otherwise, you know, Rules is going to be able to cover his angles enough to the point where he's still going to be able to utilise most of his ammunition efficiently. Isengard are now moving in and putting pressure on the Warg skirmishers with the javelins. The Warg riders are over here as well, but the addition of stuff like the Citadel Guards still being in the back lines is probably my biggest concern for Isengard. Isengard could still push through though. Like the front line, this is the downside to a tactic like this, is you do have to have several lines. And if this layer crumbles at this point and allows all of these Uruk-hai to pour forward, there isn't too much that they can send forward to stop that. With the Wargs pressuring the back lines, the Citadel Guard would need to remain where they are. These Ramazakor garrison defeat still is all. Well, actually, the ITHILIEN Rangers were able to park themselves right behind here and absolutely lay waste to the Dunman Berserkers. This must be something that Orange just missed, because this is something that you really need to catch. The Barrow Wights are now on the front line, but they're pretty much bereft of support at this point. Rules' Gandalf's retinue bodyguard is still running around the back lines. We'll go back up to 1 speed at this point, I think. Goblin Band trying to move back to cover their skirmishers. What have we here? And now we have a push. This is good to see. So they were waiting for the Barrow Wights, and now the Blackwatch Legion are pushing in. And this could be the first significant progress that Angmar have made, because at this point it's really just been the Gondorian and Angmar sort of front lines rubbing against one another, causing a lot of attrition to each other. But now, with that, maybe they can get in and do some damage. Utilise their numbers to a bit more effect. The ITHILIEN Rangers have actually turned around and are trying to shoot along this line over here, getting some nice body piercing, which is probably why the frames are dropping, to be honest with you. Rangers are just crashing machines. Yeah, and over here you can see that this portion of the front line, where the Nimlothian Honour Guard came to reinforce the infantry and the pikes, it's been a real disaster for Isengard. Over on the other side, however, where that support was not forthcoming, Isengard would win eventually, provided the Rangers were not there as well. So it does go to show that, you know, an individual elite unit can tilt a fight pretty substantially, even when the numbers are in such high quantities as this. The Nazkai are moving forward, but again, all of these Isengard units are arriving on the scene just a little bit too late. If this flanking pressure was coming while Isengard were attacking the front lines, I think the Rules would have struggled a lot more. But as it is, it's not really Orange's fault either. He wanted to move forward as quickly as possible, prevent Rules from setting up his skirmishers, and obviously he had to walk all the way around with his elite units, which are further back even at the start in deployment. So it was always going to be a little bit difficult, and fighting a sort of one of the composition that Rules uses like this with his layered skirmishes is difficult. But it's not looking good for Isengard at this point in time. They still have some pretty dangerous units, the Uruk-hai Berserkers with their AP. Not going to be easy for the Citadel Guard to take on. The Uruk-hai Berserkers do not rely on their armour, like the standard Uruk-hai units will. But the Gondorian skirmishers have almost certainly done a fair amount of heavy lifting as well. Over here though, Angmar really starting to put pressure on. They didn't actually crack all the way through the lines, but they did sort of make them bend enough to the point where the Barrow Wights could be enough to start dishing out some damage, but I would still be pretty concerned about the fact the Fountain Guard are in there. There's a lot of Fountain Guard in there still. The veterans of Osgiliath have also been committed forward to try and hold things down. And at this point actually Angmar getting around the flank here with some of their archers. Still though, the Gondorians not surrendering any sort of skirmish advantage to their enemies. The Snaga archers are actually out of ammunition, so they're just going to charge in and try and prevent the Gondorian archers from firing. Those Goblin trackers do still have ammunition, but with only 26 of them, their DPS is going to suffer greatly. Down here you can see the Barrow Wights. When they've arrived, Gondor have started to look a little bit more shaky, although with the support of Rules' infantry now starting to come over as well, I would be concerned. The Warg skirmishers are routing and broken. The Gondorians looking in a pretty good place at this point, as the Snaga also rout off and break. The Warg Riders, however, charging right in to the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard. Now, it is worth saying that one way that you can beat Wargs with Lancers is to rely on your charge. Wargs will not like getting skewered by a high charge cavalry like the retinue bodyguard, but you really don't want to keep your Lancers there for too long, because the longer you leave them there, the more the anti-cavalry bonus of the Wargs will come into play. But do bear that in mind. One thing that the Wargs are not great at is taking a charge from some of the better Lancers. Meanwhile, the Uruk-hai Berserkers, at this point, the numbers game is starting to be a bit of a problem. The Nazkai coming in here, you can see that Isengard have got their quality units fighting against the Gondorians. The Nazkai with their large two-handed great swords slash axes slash scimitars. But there just aren't enough of them at this point to turn this fight around for Isengard. There's some pikemen over there who are shaken and are almost certainly going to break. Rules has been able to essentially move these ITHILIEN Rangers around the battlefield at will and just start shooting into the most vulnerable areas of Isengard in particular. And this is no good. More damage being done. Let's go and see how Angmar are getting on though up here. You can see actually the ITHILIEN Rangers from Maximus, who are out of ammunition, are now being committed forward. The Witchround Blackguard are still in there and they're still pretty healthy at that. There goes the Isengard General, at the hands of the Citadel Guard. Yeah, Maximus's army is... Maximus is probably going to lose. If both of these battles were taking place in a vacuum, Maximus would probably lose this fight to Angmar, just because there's so many barrow wights for him left to cut through, and he doesn't really have the range presence to support his limited infantry left to do that. Having said that, I feel as though Maximus is not going to lose... Well, you know, the Gondorian player here has not lost in the same fashion that the Isengard player over there has lost. I feel as though the victory that Rules has won over here has been a little bit more substantial. Having said that, it's still a lot of barrow wights. Rules has still had to use a lot of his ammunition in dealing with Isengard. And Isengard is still here. They still have a few units, and you know, stuff like the Snaga, this could be the sort of thing which changes the match. Getting a limited volley off there, killing off a few more guards of Osgiliath, but still, Orange is going to want to save as many of these guys as he can. I don't know actually if Rules has got any of his cavalry left alive. Finishing off those Wargs may well have cost him his cavalry, which is going to be a bit of a pain. Oh no, he still has 3. Need to be careful though, because it's not going to take too much more to bring them down. In fact, Gandalf is the only one. And I feel as though he's probably going to be pinned by a javelin in a moment, and that will probably be the end of him. So as it stands, Isengard can still be useful here with their Snaga, for kiting some of Rules' units and sort of trying to deal some more damage to him. And it's interesting as well, because with the amount that Gondor invested in their skirmishers, for the longest time in this battle Gondor have been having it their way. But now that their skirmishers are all running out of ammunition, perhaps the more melee-focused approach from the Orcs will help see them through, because I mean, it's a lot of barrow wights, and the Witchround Blackguard is still fairly healthy. I would be interested to see how many of Gondor's elites from Rules are still alive. Gondor archers also rounding us. As defeat seems almost certain, I'm feeling like the barrow wights and all their HP are probably skewing the balance of power a little bit. Here goes one of the Gundabad trolls getting into the ITHILIEN Rangers, preventing them from firing for a little while before the Rangers skewer the troll. And the Rangers are also trying to be targeted by what's left of the Angmar skirmishers. So now Rules is going to have to reform his line. He's going to have to do so with the knowledge that Isengard still have their javelins. And they have actually managed to bait one of these Guards of Osgiliath units to coming all the way out here. And that could be enough to kill them, honestly. I mean, they might get back to their own lines, but they're not going to be in very good condition at all. The Snaga skirmish is over here, meanwhile. While, on one hand, what's left of Isengard's Snaga are doing quite well. The other unit is being chased off by a unit of Gondor archers, so that's, again, good play from Rules, getting rid of a potential annoyance later on in the match. It looks as though that's going to be the end of Isengard. The Nimlothian Honour Guard's still in very good condition, actually, as well as the Citadel Guard, so it's a lot of AP. The ITHILIEN Rangers are celebrating the Pelagia Marine, so still the skirmish advantage is going to be Gondor's. But how will the barrow wights do here? I mean, it's not exactly going to be a lightning-quick assault, regardless of what Angmar do here, as they kill off that remaining veteran of Osgiliath. Purely because the barrow wights are so slow that they're going to have to slowly move towards Gondor, which means any ammunition Gondor still has Angmar really are just going to have to try and tank that and hope they still have the strength to deal with what's left of Gondor's infantry once they get into melee. And I'm not sure. The Citadel Guard and the Nimlothian Honor Guard together, that's a strong combination. The rest of their units are looking a little bit battered. What have we over here? Snaga skirmishers, which are wavering and tired, being hunted mercilessly by this renegade unit of Gondor archers. And I believe, yeah, that's the other unit. So actually this one unit of Gondor archers could be enough to kill off what's left of Theoden's army. Again, those Snaga skirmishers could be the sort of thing which gives a win or a loss here. Armor-piercing projectiles are no joke, especially against a faction like Gondor. Some guards for Osgiliath. They did get back to the line in the end, so that's a nice thing for Rules there. He does have some pikes. What do Angmar have left? We've seen the Snaga from Isengard, but it's primarily Barrow-wights. 2 units of Barrow-wights which haven't taken too much damage. The Witchround Blackguard are there, but they are certainly not in the same sort of numbers as the Nimlothian Honor Guard are. And they are in range of some Gondor archers. The Goblin Trackers are firing. There's still some Angmar Marauders. But Angmar really don't have a choice but to try and just get into melee as quickly as possible and hope that they have the strength to withstand Gondor. It's going to be difficult, honestly. The speed of the Barrow-wights could end up being the thing which really lets them down here. Because that's a lot of Barrow-wights to try and cut your way through. Most curious. I believe the Goblin Trackers are going after the Nimlothian Honor Guard, and as I'm sure you can see from the sizable shields, it's fairly unlikely that they're going to do too much damage to the majority of the Gondor infantry, to be honest with you. The Guards of Osgiliath would probably be their safest bet, but even then, at this point it's just sort of annoyance more than anything else that Blue Ranger is going to be able to inflict on Rules' front line. It's going to come down to the infantry here, from an Angmar perspective. I'm not sure whether Rules' Rangers still have ammunition. If they do, it's not much, because we've been seeing them fire into the backs of Isengard's lines for quite some time in this fight. But even if they don't have ammunition, their presence will still be very welcome in melee with their skill. They probably won't be able to stand up to Barrow-wights though, and indeed the Barrow-wights in general are going to be... It's going to be difficult to reconcile with this many of them. 190, 241, that's a lot. But it is largely all Angmar have left, so it's a very slow but sure advance. What have we here? Some Gondor archers breaking ranks to try and go after the Snaga skirmishers. And again, in terms of skirmishers, you know, these Snaga are a danger to Gondor here. If they can pin the Gondorian infantry, especially something good like the Citadel Guard, with their AP javelins, that could be the sort of thing which takes away the strength Gondor need to cut their way through all these Barrow-wights. Very interesting fight so far. The percentages, however, actually the Gondorians, technically speaking, are ahead. But the quality of what's left is going to be key. And also you have to remember that routed units don't actually count towards the total, and both sides have had a lot of routing, so it's kind of difficult to gauge all of that. Maximus's army has still got units running around all over the place. A lot of the Isengard forces broke under cavalry charges. And there's some interesting shots from the Pelagia Marines going after the Barrow-wights, getting a nice volley off there. Not killing too many of them, a lot of them are getting back up. But that's still more damage, and you've got to remember, as soon as the Barrow-wights have been robbed of their hit points, they are substantially less scary. Their stats don't fill you with too much confidence, honestly. Here go the Gondorian archers. The Snaga are going to throw their volley into the Gondorian archers and try and break them before they get into melee. And they are not going to be successful. The Gondorian archers keep their nerve, and in melee that fight will certainly go towards the Gondor archers, so good for them for maintaining their nerve. Angmar really need to get into melee as quickly as they possibly can. This is a problem though. The one remaining Isengard unit, a key pillar to this assault, was not able to kill off the Gondor archers quickly enough, and that could result in their demise. There's some Goblin Trackers over here as well who are also shaken. There's not much in the way of stomach left for this fight. I don't believe you can break the Barrow-wights. I believe they are unbreakable. I mean, you know, they're wraiths, so Undead. How can you break undead? Here come the Angmar Marauders. Moving up with some Blackwatch Legion and some Goblin Band and some Gundabad Guard in there as well. ITHILIEN Rangers marching around the flank. Here go the Gondor Archers, and they are going to worm their way through to get to the Snaga. And there we go. The Gondor Archers sufficient to finally finish off Isengard, and that's a real shame because those javelins could have been incredibly, incredibly handy. Now then, the ITHILIEN Rangers do still have ammunition. The question is how much. They're actually not going for the Barrow-wights. Rules fancies his chances in melee with all the Barrow-wights. Instead, he's going to be going for these units over here, the Blackwatch, the Gundabad Guard. Whatever happened to the Blackguard? Ah, they're in here. Only 15 of them left. The Nimlothian Honour Guard being kept in reserve for when they're needed. The Rangers still firing in, doing a lot of damage there to the Angmar centre. Well, well, well. Citadel Guard doing their best on the front line, but they are also in melee with the Barrow-wights. And this is another problem. I mean, you can see that any units of lower tier Gondorian stuff that's still alive, not going to be too thrilled with having to fight Barrow-wights because they do cause fear. But the higher tier Gondorian units should be okay, and indeed Rules is sending his Nimlothians to try and stem the bleeding over here. You can see that the frame rate is positively crying as the ITHILIEN Rangers go about their grisly work on the Barrow-wights. And that is going to be the end of their ammunition. They did kill off about 30, but it's the damage we aren't seeing, the damage to the hit points, which might be the key here. As the ITHILIEN Rangers come in here, presumably to try and get a rear charge. Well, they could be moving over here as well, these Gondorian archers. It's all hands to the pump here for Gondor. And these Barrow-wights, it's going to be close. It's real dicey here for both sides. The Gundabad Guard, this centre here, they're trying to free up all of these Citadel Guards so they can send them somewhere else. And that should be enough to do it. That rear charge from the ITHILIEN Rangers should be enough to free up another unit of those AP Gondor Spears. Maybe to try and get a surround off over here. Victory is a distinct possibility. The Barrow-wights actually losing this fight over here now. Do we have any Blackguard left? Only 7. The Nimlothian Honour Guard really showing their stuff in melee. That's the last of Maximus's army, but I'm fairly sure that, yeah, that unit of Gondor Archers was the only thing he had left fighting, and Gondor Archers are not really equipped to deal with Barrow-wights, and that means these Barrow-wights will be able to get a partial surround on the Nimlothian Honour Guard. But will that really matter when all of these units get free? The gap has grown as well, so I think Gondor might just be able to pull this one out. Over here, though, this unit of Barrow-wights, which was pinned by all of those body-piercing projectiles, is still doing a very good job against these Gondorian pikes, whose formation is not really what pikemen want to be in, but their job really at this point is just to try and hold out for as long as they possibly can, and allow the Citadel Guard and then the Nimlothian Honour Guard to do their work, which is going very well for them so far, I must say. Here come the ITHILIEN Rangers, again getting another rear charge. I think Gondor are going to do it. I don't think the strength of the Barrow-wights is going to be enough to see Angmar across the line here. And this again is going to be a pretty good advertisement here for Gondor's resilience in the face of aggression. Rules in particular, obviously Rules has been playing Reforged since the very beginning, so he's pretty good. Much better than me. But Gondor in general are very resilient, sort of a very resilient faction, so of all the human kingdoms that can pull this sort of thing off, trying to just sort of hold the line, that sort of philosophy, Gondor are one of the better human factions for doing that. Quite a lot in common with the dwarves in that respect, I suppose. And with the upcoming patch, I maintain that with the proposed changes, Gondor would probably be one of the strongest, unless Gondor have got any planned changes to try and sort of offset that, but I doubt it somehow. But suffice it to say, in 0.97, I believe Gondor will become one of the stronger factions, top tier. Depending on how they do that, obviously a lot can change between then and now, and things may be tweaked. But I feel as though Gondor, as it stands, they're not thought poorly of. Like Dol Amroth are not really thought too highly of in the current balance of things. But Gondor, by no means, I think, is seen as one of the strongest factions. Like, certainly not on the level of something like Khazad-dûm or Lindon, who, you know, those are the two which people often mention as being very, very strong. Lindon, you know, for just the fact that they're so easy to play, Lindon, and Khazad-dûm because there are a few compositions you can bring just sort of based on your infantry and based on your strengths, which are really, really powerful. But I still feel as though Gondor are pretty tough, pretty strong. This fight, I think, showcases that quite well. They stood up to an Angmar rush for quite a long time, an Angmar rush which had some pretty devastating cavalry. It was really only when the Barrow-wights came on the scene later on that the Gondorian player up there started to struggle. And against Isengard down here, Rules did a very good job. I feel as though, you know, Orange, if he had delayed his assault a little bit by waiting for some of his units to get a little bit further around, Rules only had one unit of cavalry that you had to watch out for. That was certainly manageable. But even so, I think that one misstep really cost Orange more. And if he had waited for a unified assault, there's no guarantee that he would have won. But I feel as though at the very least he would have done more damage. And if that had been the case, then perhaps here in the late game, Blue Rangers, Barrow-wights and Blackguard would have been able to pull out the victory. But as it is, Gondor are going to take this one home. A very gritty performance. A very Gondorian performance. This is very indicative of them. The ITHILIEN Rangers also proving themselves to be very, very strong indeed. We'll see what did the damage for the Gondorian armies on the end screen here. Still a few Barrow-wights left in this mosh pit. I think this is going to be the last one. He's fighting off against infantry, and actually the infantry just sort of stabbing him over and over. Oh, there he goes. He's on the ground. Finish him off. Well, he died from something. Trampled.
Our soldiers have fought and died well today.
Yes, they did. So, let's see what did the damage. And Rules obviously getting more kills, but then he was obviously there until the late game. Maximus getting a decent share of kills as well. Orange Phaedon getting a lower amount of kills, but then again, you know, for the reasons we've already said. Let's see what happens. So Rules, the Gandalf's Retinue Bodyguard getting a lot of kills. Again, I feel as though early on in particular when he was recharging into the Angmar lines pretty much unopposed, that was a bit of a misplay by Blue Ranger in particular. He really just sort of sat there and took it. His cavalry was off trying to deal with Maximus's cavalry, and you could see that Orange's wargs sort of eventually came to the rescue, but needed to be a little bit quicker on the uptake than that because it allowed Rules to use his one unit of cavalry very, very effectively. Very high charge on the Gandalf's Retinue Bodyguard. With multiple HP Lancers, I think it is the full charge bonus of 20 as well. The ITHILIEN Rangers, obviously, again, this was perhaps another misplay from the Orc factions in general. They allowed these Rangers to get into such compromising positions and just allowed them to shoot right along the Isengard line, even towards the end when they were shooting along the Barrow-wights line, although by that point they really didn't have much of an option, the Angmar player. Having a look elsewhere, pretty average kills across the board. Obviously the archers doing well for themselves. That, generally speaking, is going to be the takeaway from this. The Ramazakal Garrison archers did not. That was the one benefit to the Isengard quick advance. They did not allow the cheap archers to get any sort of cost effectiveness done. But the rest of the Gondorian army under the command of Rules certainly did. The Gondor Infantry and Citadel Guard and Guards of Osgiliath doing their job perfectly. Meanwhile, Maximus's army, again the ITHILIEN Rangers, the MVPs, not surprising. Both Orc factions went very melee heavy, and when their cavalry, you know, particularly the Angmar cavalry, it wasn't able to win as decisively as maybe it needed to start putting real pressure on the back of the Gondorian lines, and that allowed still Maximus's army to get a nice amount of value off his archers. The Gondor archers doing decently well for themselves, the veterans as well. Obviously their effect in melee was not really seen, but I'm sure that it was felt. The Fountain Guard actually not doing all that well. I feel as though that was because they were committed when the front line of Gondor was already falling apart. The Gondor Spearmen did quite well initially, but then when the heavy hitting units like the Blackwatch Legion and the Trolls arrived, things started to go downhill a little bit more. But yeah, well played. Thank you to Maximus for sending this one in. A lot of mech clan here. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next, which might be one of those quality versus quantity things that I was talking about doing. It kind of depends. I've got a few things that I've already sort of pre-recorded, so it kind of depends in what order I want to put them out, but that'll be something that I decide, I'm sure.